Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of Novelists Unwind. I'm so glad to have you with us. My special guest today is Jennifer Uhlarik, and Jennifer has had an amazing career, especially writing novellas for different Barber collections. So we're going to talk to her about that today, about her inspiration for ideas, and then also about some of the new ventures in her life. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be with you.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Jennifer and I met each other after being in the same Barber collection, so I'm going to show that one. We were both, this is my only one so far, the Courageous Brides collection. And of course, we were in a group together, as you know, all the authors, as we were getting ready to write those stories and bounce ideas off. And Jennifer was so helpful to me because I had never written a novella before. And I wasn't sure exactly how to do the pacing. And I don't know whether you remember that I, kind of sent out a help. And,
Yes.
and you responded that, here's one way to do it, and I was able then to take the synopsis that I had to write to get the contract and sort of divide it up in between those things, just so that I knew with the word count where to go.
Right.
And now you teach a class like that.
I actually did. I was able to teach at the Florida Christian Writers Conference this just a couple of months ago.
Wow.
And it was a great experience. I actually got to teach two classes, one on writing Westerns and then one on writing novellas. And so we did actually talk about the pacing and how to, break down your chapters and so forth. So it was a lot of fun.
It's a lot different than writing a novel because you have to just sort of put
it's so condensed.
It is condensed. But wow, you've had some great success. So you've been in 7, is that right, collections?
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
yes.
Well show us the 2 that we're actually featuring today.
Okay. Well, the one that came out February 1st is actually the Mail Order Brides collection. And this one was a lot of fun to write. My story in this one was called The Brigand and the Bride. And but it was about a young woman who was trying to escape from her outlaw brother. So she takes a mail order husband, but she winds up marrying the wrong man.
Oh my gosh, what twist. And you were able to do that in just like 20, 30,000 words. Have all
20,000 words, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And then the other one, my most recent one that came out April 1st is the First Love Forever collection. And this one is about first loves that are rekindled years later. And I was really, really excited to write this one because the characters that are the hero and heroine in this story actually appeared in my Courageous Bride story.
In this one.
That's correct, in that one.
So, in this one.
They were 11 and 12 years old in the Courageous Bride story, and here they are in this one all grown up. But the other really interesting thing about this story is that both hero and heroine are hearing impaired.
Yes.
And so they, I had to write the story without using any sound.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm big on, you hear the horse hooves rushing into the scene, and I couldn't do that in this one. So it was a challenge.
I bet it was a challenge. I spent a delightful morning reading Heartfelt Echoes.
Oh, wonderful.
I did, and just really enjoyed the story. So that's another plus about that. I mean, I was able to read that entire novella.
Yes.
And just, I did it this morning, and I slept in late, so it's like I still was able to read it anyway, and it was delightful. And then, okay, 2 things. Then, knowing that character was from the Courageous Brides collection, so that was really cool. And in the tie-in of the names, because your story in Courageous Brides is Mountain Echoes.
That's right.
And in this one, it's Heartfelt Echoes. So. And it's about hearing impaired. So tell, why echoes? How did that sort of come about, that was the word that you chose to tie these titles together?
I don't even know where it came from. I mean, it began all the way back with the Courageous Bride story. And
it's been a couple, 3 years now?
Let's see. I think that one came out in
hard to remember.
2016. So
2016. Yeah, 2016 is when it came.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
But I came up with Mountain Echoes. And of course, the hero and heroine in that story were not hearing impaired.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to think of, just things that would go along with the mountains and so forth. And of course I, thought of the old thing of, echo, echo, echo. So, and I mean, that was just kind of what came to my mind. And anyway, so I went with that. And then when it came up to deciding what characters I was going to write about in my First Love Forever story, I very quickly decided it had to be Travis and Millie because they were the only ones that I already had ties to from another story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just kind of became easy to, do a play on the title from the earlier story so that it would help tie readers back to, oh, I remember she had another one with echoes in the name. Yeah. And hopefully that, they would go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I do remember these characters. So, it just, I don't know. That was kind of where it came from.
Oh, I love that. I just love that connection. And then too, the research that you did for that, because you based it on a real school for the blind and the deaf in California. So, I read a little bit about that. So tell us a little bit about
your when I decided that I was going to write the Courageous Bride story, mm-hmm. I was trying to find a reason why somebody would have to go across the mountains, because that particular story was about a stagecoach accident. Mm-hmm. And so I needed a reason for somebody to be crossing the Sierra Nevada mountains. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I was looking for a good reason, what would be a compelling reason, and Hannah Rose Stockton was, I decided, a worker at a school for...
I love that name, too.
Oh, thank you. But she worked for the California School for the Deaf, which is actually a historic school. It started in the 1860s, and it was started by a group of women who saw that there were many indigent children who were just roaming around the streets of San Francisco and, didn't have any ability to go to school. Many of them were poor, too poor to go to private schools or go out of state and so forth. So they banded together and decided that they were going to begin a school in California. And they would take in children who were both blind and deaf, mm-hmm. and be able to teach them. And so originally the school started out for both blind and deaf students. And eventually over time it did split apart into two separate schools. So there's the California School for the Blind and now the California School for the Deaf. Mm-hmm. But, I did research on it and I found historic pictures of the actual building, in San Francisco, and, I kind of followed it up through a certain point and I found it fascinating. So I was really excited to get to put some of their history into the story.
Yeah, that's really exciting when you can do that. And also the use of American Sign Language, ASL. Mm-hmm. I actually used American Sign Language as my language to go into my master's degree because I had taken like 2 years of it. But now I can finger spell really quick. That's about it. I forget. You forget so much of it.
Yes.
But I couldn't. As we're talking, it's like when did ASL become a thing? So
actually, I think it was after this period that that I was writing about. I can't remember officially when what we know as ASL became, the language, but they did have sign language, some form of sign language that was, used, and they brought somebody over from, I want to say France, mm-hmm. and they combined French Sign Language with some Indian Sign Language, and
Wow.
so they were able to create a language. And after that gentleman came over, then you began seeing more and more schools for the deaf popping up. So it was, I don't think it was ASL as we know it today, but it was a form of sign language that was unique to America.
Yeah, and you talked about writing without sound, and I thought that was really cool. I'm not giving away any spoilers, but just like you would have like Travis, he can speak, but he can't hear, but he
Correct.
can lips. And it was like, he felt something on his boot, so he turned because he knew someone was trying to get his attention. And I think it was your heroine, and I just read it this morning, Millie. What's her name? Waiting to see the light, and then she would know that someone had left the house. Or yes,
right.
That is so cool, and just that you had to go that step with the writing.
With this particular story, I do research every story, obviously, but with this particular story, I kind of had to immerse myself in the deaf culture. So I was watching documentaries, 2-hour-long documentaries on deaf culture, and I was trying to remember. Part of the reason why I got so interested in the deaf is because when I was a preteen, one of my very best friends had a younger sister who was deaf.
Wow.
And the church that we went to had a deaf culture, and it was a very small church. So anywhere you sat in the church, you could see the section where the deaf people would sit, and you could see them signing and so I was kind of around that in my young teen years, and just got really interested in it all, and tried to take some sign language classes at different points across my young adulthood. And unfortunately, I never had anyone to practice with, so I didn't have, I never.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun to me to actually be able to immerse myself in the deaf culture, and just the try to understand their mentality and so forth for this story. So I hope I did it well.
Yeah, I think you did. And I love it too that, we often in romance itself, gets criticized as, the hero and heroine are always these perfect people. They're beautiful, they're handsome, da, da, da. And it's just not true.
Right.
And you obviously have demonstrated that with a story where the heroine is deaf and actually has a disfiguration.
Right.
And the hero can talk. He is deaf too. So, you've got these two physically flawed people, but they find each other beautiful and they love each other. And
exactly.
They
see beyond all the imperfections to see, who they are inside, and to know that, I remember you when you were young and beautiful and perfect, but it doesn't matter that you're not now. So
exactly. I really like that too.
Thank you.
I've not read the mail order collection, but I love, and because I was going to ask you, mail order, that has been done a million, 100,000, billion times.
Yes.
And how do you find a unique story when you're going to submit? Because, for those of you who don't know, the barber process is usually, you have to, you either get a group together or you submit an idea, and they need to see what, at least a blurb or a synopsis, of what your story is going to be about before they will contract you for it.
Right.
And, oh my gosh, how did 9 of you come up with
unique stories?
Yeah, unique and different stories. And then you say, oh, well, she had a mail order husband. I was like, oh, okay. There you go.
This one was kind of an interesting story for me because sometimes I'll come up with like the whole concept of the story and I'll see it from beginning to end. And other times I'll get just a small snippet and know, okay, I have to write this because this is so intriguing to me. And the thing about this, the mail order bride, story, which again was the Brigand and the Bride, that particular one, I had the opening scene which was the heroine
Mm-hmm.
going to, she's in a neighboring town from where she lives, and she goes to the tailor shop and picks up a suit, and she then hurries to the church and lays out the suit and lays out, a brush and a razor and, all the different things that a man would need to get ready. And so she puts all those things out, and then she goes into a separate room and gets herself ready, thinking he's going to show up and he's going to be there. And so then she goes and gets ready in the sanctuary of the church, and they're kind of on a time crunch because the pastor and his wife have to catch the afternoon stage. So the guy that ends up walking down the aisle put on the suit trying to escape the law. And it's not the man that she was supposed to marry. But when she gets, or when he gets down the aisle to her, the law comes rushing in thinking, we just saw this guy run in the church, so where is he? And he shaved his beard and he's cut his hair and put on a suit so he doesn't look the same. And while they're standing there, staring at his back, they don't even recognize him, and he has to go through with the wedding.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so there he is. That's cool. Is Liz Tolzna in that collection? Because
that one, I've been in so many.
Yes,
she is.
Yeah. So I interviewed her also for Novelists Unwind, and we talked about her story too.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I'm gonna have to get that one because that just sounds like a lot of fun going on.
Yes, I tell you what, we've gotten a lot of really good feedback on that particular one. It's such a perennial favorite, the Mail Order Brides story.
It is. People love them. It's like, but again, I was saying, man, how they come up with just something new and fresh and different when it's been done so many times.
Yes.
You did it. You did it. Well, I also want to tell everybody that Jennifer, of course, writes mostly, I think all Westerns. Am I correct that that's your genre of choice?
Yes.
And yet has lived almost all of her life in Florida.
That is true. I have lived in Florida since I was 10 years old. So, and I've never owned a horse.
But, and a lot of people don't know this because, I lived in Florida. Most of my adult life, I lived in Florida, did not grow up there. But there is quite a cowboy heritage in Florida. And
that's true.
And certainly was where I lived and where I raised my kids. There were ranches, there were people that still rode horseback to round up the cattle and all that kind of thing. Even, today they do that.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a very rich heritage in Florida, similar to the Wild West. But tell us about how this Florida girl ended up being so consumed with the West that that's all she wants to write about.
Well, okay. The funny story is that I grew up reading all the horse books I could get my hands on when I was a young girl. I would read like Misty and Black Stallion books and any of those. And as I began to age and get past kind of the young adult stories, I needed a book to take to school. So I didn't have anything that had horses in it, and I was going crazy. So I ran into my oldest brother's room. He's 7 years older than I am. And of course, by this point he's in high school, and ran into his room, and he had maybe this many books on a shelf on his wall. And I looked at every cover, and I grabbed the only one that had a horse on the cover. And it happened to be a Louis L'Amour Western. So I grabbed it, ran off to school, began reading, and I quickly discovered that the horse was cool, but the guy on the horse was even cooler. So I very quickly fell in love with cowboys. And in the town where I live, there is a great used bookstore. It's called the Book Swap. And once I got my driver's license, I would go down to the Book Swap, and they had just racks of Louis L'Amour Westerns, multiple copies of the same book, and they'd sell them for about 25 cents. So I would go through and find the best used copy of each one of his titles. And I had all of his titles printed out on a piece of paper that I kept in my wallet, in my purse.
Wow.
And I would check off which ones I had gotten. And I made sure that I had every one of his books.
That's
And
amazing.
by the time I got into college, I bought them all and read them all. And oh my gosh, that was what I cut my teeth on. So.
Wow. Amazing and a little crazy.
Yeah, that's me.
I love it. No, I love it. That is so cool, though, that, you know, as a high school person, you know, a high school student, that this is what you were so, I don't want to use the word consume because I said that once already, but this is what you just loved so much that you know, that you kept the list and did all that. I love that. Do you still have all those books?
Unfortunately, no. Actually, as I got into my adulthood, I began buying the actual collector's editions, the leather-bound ones.
Wow.
And I had, I would say, 75% of them in the leather-bound versions.
Wow.
And then I needed brakes on my car, so I sold them all on eBay and got enough money to be able to get the brakes that I needed on my car. You know, it's just what you have to do when you don't have money. So.
Exactly, it is. But still, that's just such a cool story. I mean, it's been a long time since I've read Louis L'Amour, but you know, I went through it, not like you did, but a time when I was reading them. My dad liked to read them too, so I think that was part of, you know.
Yeah.
Read them. And you know, you just love those heroes that, I mean, like you said, there was such a definite black and white, which we don't always see in heroes today.
That's right.
You know, and yeah, that's strong.
In the more modern stories, you don't have those real defined
you don't
good guy, bad guy kind of roles. So.
Exactly. Yep. There's something really cool about that too. I just love it. I love that whole story.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's neat. So next up, I saw on your website that you have a book coming out called Sand Creek Serenade.
Correct.
Put out not by Barber this time, but by...
No, this one is actually put out by Smitten, which is an imprint, the historical romance imprint of Lighthouse Publishing of the Carolinas. Mm-hmm. And this is my first full-length novel that I'll have published.
Yay.
And I'm really excited about this one because I have a love of the Native American cultures. Mm-hmm. And so I got to write heavily about the Cheyenne Indians. And it's actually a romance between a half Cheyenne, half white man and a white female doctor. Mm-hmm. And the setting is 1864 Colorado, and it takes place with the Sand Creek Massacre that happened in southeastern Colorado. So the Cheyenne man, who's my hero, is wrapped up in the massacre and is a survivor. But it's, you know, and my heroine winds up going and treating the Indians. Mm-hmm. So, it was a lot of work, and I'll be honest, you know, with events from history like that, I have always tended to shy away from them. Mm-hmm. Because they're so researched and there's so much out there that, you know, I've always been afraid I'm going to get something wrong and then I'm going to get bad reviews and, mm-hmm. you know, but I don't know, somehow God just laid this one on my heart, and I really feel like it's going to be good. So we're in the editing process right now, and it'll be out in March next year. So.
Oh, wow. Well, looking forward to that.
Thank you.
I don't know about the Sand Creek Massacre. So that's.
Yeah, it's a really sad event from our history. Mm-hmm. Black Kettle and the Cheyenne were seeking peace, and so they had gone to Fort Lyon, where Major Ned Wynkoop began talking with them about peace. He ended up taking a small contingent of the Arapaho and Cheyenne elders mm-hmm. to Denver, Colorado, to talk with the governor and Colonel Chivington, who kind of oversaw the military in that area at the time. And they promised peace, told them to go back, and the Arapaho camped beside the fort for a while the Cheyenne went to Sand Creek. And they wound up, they were supposed to fly both the American flag and the white flag over Black Kettle's tent. And as long as they did that, then they would have the protection of the Army. But on November 28th, Colonel Chivington brought in about 600 men, gathered all of the troops up from the fort, and 700 people marched in and just slaughtered the Indians when they'd been promised peace. So, and it was mainly women and children and just a few of the older people. All the men had gone to their hunting grounds like a day north. So, it was a horrible, horrible massacre. And it ended up that the Ned Wynkoop actually investigated the entire thing. He had been removed from the fort and sent elsewhere. And after the massacre, then he was sent back to the fort to investigate everything. But unfortunately, because of the contracts that a lot of these soldiers were under, it was a 100-day contract. And by the time that Ned Wynkoop got around to investigating the massacre, their contract had ended. They were no longer in the military, and he couldn't touch them.
Oh my gosh. Wow. What a story.
Yeah. It was a horrid, situation. And it was one of the things that kind of spawned the 30 years of Indian wars that we had from, the 1870s into like the turn of the century time period. So, it's one of those really terrible parts of our history that I wish had never happened, but I'm excited I got to write about it, and I hope it'll just kind of bring to light some of the things that we've done to each other. So,
and that's why I like to read historical fiction, is because I learn from it, and I appreciate authors who will go the extra mile to try to keep things as right as possible. And maybe, maybe you are going to get some little details wrong or whatever, but, you do your best, because I want to know, this is kind of how it really did happen, And I lived in Nebraska. We talked about this before we started the recording, just for a few years as a young mom. And of course, the Indian history and the pioneer history seemed to be so much closer in time. I grew up in Ohio, where it had been like the 1700s, where unfortunately the Indians had, moved west. And when I moved to Nebraska, it was like it was still, very fresh, all these things. So I knew about, Wounded Knee, for example, and I became very interested in the history of that part. And in fact, it was an event from the Poncas being forced to move from their home on the Niobrara River.
Right.
That inspired my story in the Courageous Brides collection. It was based on a true happening. So, fascinating story. I'm can't wait for that to come out.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to have to make sure next March I'm reminded of that. Now, also want to mention that several of Jennifer's books have hit the ECPA bestseller list, the Barber collections, which is always cool, including Courageous Bride. So that was really glad to be in that. And you won some writing competitions and finaled in some writing competitions. And so I saw on your website that you participated in the Central Florida chapter of American Christian Fiction Writers. For a few years was doing a prompt response.
Yes.
And I saw the years you did that. Well, I judged that one year, so I went back, because of course they were anonymous, so I would not have known whose entry was who. But I went back into my files and said, "Oh, did I judge?" Because you had the name there, and I don't think I was a judge either of those 2 years. I wasn't a judge until 2015, but I was involved in making sure they got judged. That that process of it.
Right.
So, those contests were based, if I remember right, it's been a few years, on pictures, and you would come up with you would write a story based on a picture. Is that right? Or a scenario? Yeah.
I think the first time, I can't remember exactly how they did it. It
scenario.
wasn't a picture.
Yeah.
The first one that I won, but the second one was.
Yeah, I think the first time it was like a setup, and then people had to do it. But I remember reading them all because they were also we had really good interest, and it was a lot of fun reading those very short stories because they had to be really short and tight, or maybe just the beginning. So have you ever done anything with any of those stories, developed them any further, or they just sort of
well, actually, I have started to write a novel based on the first one.
Do you remember what it was then?
That one was well, the story that I am trying to write, and I haven't worked on it in quite a while, but I want to get back to it because it's an exciting story. It's actually called Whiskey Row. That's the working title.
Mm-hmm.
And the scene that I wrote for the contest, for the prompt response contest, was about somebody, the hero's brother was murdered, and the heroine sees him looking for his brother, and she tells him, your brother was just murdered, you need to get off this boat. And they were on a river boat.
Yeah.
And so he realizes, you've seen who killed my brother, we both need to get off the boat. So he winds up grabbing her, and they run and they jump off the boat, and just as his feet hit the rail and they jump overboard, she says, but I can't swim. So he's just pulled a woman who can't swim over into the Mississippi River. So
I love it. That sounds vaguely familiar. So I think I did read that, because those were great. Those were so fun. I don't know why they don't do them anymore, but those were so fun to do. And people are so creative and just come up with, I mean, they were short, and most people did sort of tie it up with a little ending, you know. It was a lot of fun. So congrats though on that too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Now you have not only been wearing a writer's hat for a while, you have now put on the hat of an acquisitions editor.
That is correct.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
Okay. Well, this was completely, it's kind of a convoluted story, so bear with me, but I went to the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference last year for the first time. And I had met Eva Marie Everson years ago. I sat through one of her fiction practicum classes, and she was so encouraging to me and so forth. Well, when I decided I was going to go to Blue Ridge, I entered one of my stories into the SALA contest. Mm-hmm. And of course I didn't end up doing anything there. You know, I didn't even place, and that's fine. But that was the catalyst for me reconnecting with Eva. Mm-hmm. And when when she saw my name come across her desk, now of course Eva is the one who coordinates the contest. Right. So when she saw my name roll across her desk and saw my book, you know, she was like, oh, I know that person. Oh, she's published. And then she went and looked me up, and she realized I'd been published at that time 5 times over. Mm-hmm. And so she contacted me on Facebook, and we reconnected there. And then at the conference, we wound up sitting down one evening and had this really beautiful chat. We talked for about a half an hour before a general session, and just had a really wonderful time. And then the next day she put out on my Facebook, you need to come and see me. And I was like, okay. So I found her at lunchtime, and right after lunch, we were getting ready to take our dishes to the conveyor belt and get rid of them, let them be washed. And she says, I have a job offer for you. And
wow.
She offered me a job editing novella collections for her Firefly Southern Fiction line. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I never saw myself as an editor, so I, was kind of freaked out by it all. And thank God my husband was there with me. We were turning it into not only the writers conference, but also a few days of vacation time too.
Mm-hmm.
So he was there having lunch with us, and I had walked away with Eva when she offered me the job. My husband was standing about 10 feet away. I walked back to him and said, I just got offered a job, and immediately burst into tears. I was so overwhelmed. I just, and I mean, thank God he was there, because I sat for 3 days going, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. I mean, it floored me. And, we prayed about it, we talked about it, and we finally decided, God's opening this door. You need to do this. So I got into editing the first novella collection that she's putting out through Firefly. And there was an issue that I needed to talk with her about. So I wound up in October. That was in May. Mm-hmm. This is October now. I am talking with her on the phone and just kind of telling her where I am. And I was just mentally and emotionally kind of in a bad place at the time. I'd had some difficult rejections on some of my full-length novels, and just really questioning, Lord, what are you doing?
Been there, I know exactly what you mean.
This is so typical of writers, because it's a difficult business,
Yes.
So God had kind of called me to take a writing pause. Mm-hmm. And so I knew it wasn't going to be a long pause, but that was at the point that I called Eva and I was saying, okay, I'm editing this story and I've got this issue. How do I handle it? And we talked through that problem, and then somehow my writing pause and where I was emotionally and mentally came up. And I was just telling her, I got another bad rejection, and it wasn't for any reason other than they just don't do Westerns. And, I'm finding it so difficult to find places that will. And she said, why don't you consider opening your own Western imprint through Lighthouse Publishing in the Carolinas?
Is that possible?
And I was like, wow, I didn't know it was possible. So anyway, we agreed that I would take some time and pray about it, talk with my husband, and within days, I knew God was saying, yes, you need to do this. And so Eva helped me talk to Eddie, who owns Lighthouse Publishing, and he was on board with it immediately. So, God just laid out all the pieces from that first moment when Eva offered me the job editing little novella collections for her to get me to the point of saying, you can be an acquisitions editor and, do this. So now I'm heading up Trailblazer Western Fiction for Lighthouse Publishing in the Carolinas. And our first title is Cowboys and Angels. It'll be out in August. And, still looking for that next one. So
well,
if anyone novels out there, please send them my way.
Here's your call.
That's right.
That's so cool, because you said there's not many places that do Westerns, and yet I think Barber has shown that people want to read that. Because so many of their collections, not all, but so many of them do take place.
Yes.
West, and in that time period. So it's kind of the same thing with fantasy. So many Christian authors have trouble placing their fantasy, and yet
that's right.
There are people who want to read that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there is a market for it. It's just a matter of getting the publishers to believe in it.
To agree, yeah. So that's.
But God opens and closes doors, and the really great thing is that I can see his fingerprints on all of those pieces. Every one of the rejections was lining me up to do Trailblazer.
Exactly.
And, so I can't say I'm sorry that I got the rejections, because it brought me to this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they are hard when you get them. And I know that, but too, in hindsight, it's so interesting how you often are happy about, that was a good thing.
Exactly.
Rejection was a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember one that I had, and I was really, it was like, oh my goodness, because it had gone through several steps, and it was like, no. it was with Abingdon, and come to find out they were closing their fiction line. So wow, I was glad that had fallen through. Because it would have fallen through anyway.
Exactly.
And someone else bought it, bought that series. So yeah, I mean yeah, you just never know. So, and two, I think what's interesting of part of your whole story, writing is a difficult business. It's also this long journey. I mean, years. Like you've been doing these novellas and now have really made a name for yourself as almost like a novella, as a novella expert, because you're in 7 different collections, and that's so cool. And now you've got the authority to teach on how to do these and how to edit them. And you never know where God's going to put you, that you're going to end up with these niches of expertise, that you may not have solved or realized that you could do. I don't really need it.
Yeah, my agent, I'm not with her now, but my former agent used to tell me all the time, "You're the novella queen." And I always kind of shunned that, because I was like, no, I want to be writing longer things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, God has a purpose for it. And, I see now where I needed to be working on these novellas, because that was the thing that attracted Eva to me to become an editor, which then, became the springboard for me becoming the acquisitions editor at Trailblazer. And, so, it may not have been the process I would have chosen for myself, but God knew.
God knows, and you just have to trust that. And also then to put in a plug for going to writers' conferences, because and entering contests. When people ask me advice, my dog is I'm sorry if you can hear that noise. He's great, and he's sort of, I don't know what he's doing. He's just like, please lay down. Goodbye. Sorry about that. When people ask me advice for beginning writers, I always say, get a critique group, go to conferences, and enter contests, because that is, the two, especially conferences and contests, are going to get your work seen by other people, and you just don't know who's going to be the judge, or who's, that might then lead on to something else. And with conferences, that is, networking opportunities are priceless. I mean, I know it's a lot of money often to go to a conference, but it's an investment you really need to make.
Well, and the really cool thing is, you can't look at a writer's conference and say, I don't see any immediate payout because I didn't sell something, or, you just don't know what connection you're going to make. Like I said, I met Eva in 2011.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 2017 that she was offering me a job. So it was 6 years that, it took for that payout to come. I had to go through all of these other things, but God was laying the foundation in 2011 for what was going to come 6 years later. And, that's the beauty of the networking and just, really connecting yourself to other people and getting your work out there before, anybody will look at it, really.
Yeah.
So
patience and persistence.
That's right. That's right. And you've got to have that in this industry.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. Gosh, Jennifer, we've been talking for quite a while, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. So let me just, one last thing. You also blog at Heroes, Heroines, and History.
That is correct.
Plug in for that website. That is not the URL, though. The URL is...
It's HH and...
oh gosh, I'll make sure I put it in the
I think it's hhhistory.com.
Something like that. I mean, I subscribe to it, so I get it in my email box, so I don't go to the actual website. I just, so but
yes,
it's a great
I'm fairly certain it's hhhistory.com.
Anyone who's interested in history, I mean, they cover, because you have somebody new or different that blogs every day. Am I correct on that? You've got like 30,
yes, I think we've got 30 different bloggers, and on the 31st of the month, then we do a book day where we just feature the different books that are put out by the
by
authors
those
that are
people in that. And
on
so
the
it
blog.
covers all kinds of stuff. I mean, you never really know what's gonna pop up. It can be Western history, it can be World War II history, which of course is ones I really love. Fashion, inventions, just
Yes,
it runs
it's,
the gamut. And I think over
it
this
does.
period of time, you guys have just built up a storehouse of knowledge
Oh,
and
I mean,
resources.
it's amazing what you can find on, we started in 2013, I think, and that was before I was published.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last person, I took the last slot that they had when they opened it up and were looking for bloggers, and it was a stretch for me at the time. But it has become such a godsend because it's a way that I can, once a month I can put out information,
Mm-hmm.
um, just kind of blog on different things that relate to whatever story I'm promoting at the time.
Yeah.
Um, so, it's a fun way to be able to interact with readers. We do, often we'll do giveaways where we give away a copy of our books or, something that relates to our stories. And I mean, we've got subscribers all across the world,
I'm sure.
and it's really become a great thing. So I'm so pleased that I was able to get in with them.
Yeah, that really is. That's really cool. And I'm very happy to, just make other people aware of it. So now here is my actual very last question.
Yes.
What I ask everybody as we wind up the interview is, when you're done with the story, when you hit the end, it's done, how do you unwind?
Probably just going out, sitting on the couch with my husband while he watches TV. I'm on my computer just playing some games, unwinding, and I'll play bingo or
Just something very different than words. Well, bingo, it was letters, but yes, I get it. Just because I kind of play
but
solitaire.
it's mindless,
It's mindless, actually, and it's totally not creating stories and
Exactly.
wrestling with characters who don't want to do what you want them to do. Well, it always turns out better, and you're going like, okay, you guys tell the story. You know what
Yes. So yeah, I'm a big game player. I'll sit out and just sit wrapped up in a blanket and I'll just play games. So
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again so much. Tell people where they can find you.
yeah, you can find my website at jenniferuhlarik.com. And that spelling is JenniferUhlarik.com. And I'm on Facebook as well, so just look me up under my name and you'll find me.
She has a unique name, so she will not be hard to find.
No, I am not hard to find as long as you spell it correctly. I'm one of the few.
That's great. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun, really.
It's been fun talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And everybody, just glad that you joined Jennifer and me today, and hope you come back again to see who I have on next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.